Pakistan is currently experiencing one of the most significant constitutional conflicts in its recent history. At the center of it all is the proposed 27th Constitutional Amendment. It seeks to reshape the judiciary structure and authority. This is not just a legal debate, it's a power struggle involving the judiciary, the political government, and the military establishment. The central clash is simple: should courts remain independent guardians of democracy, or should political and military actors be allowed to redesign the judiciary to manage political stability? Pakistan's judiciary has had a complex dual legacy for decades, especially under Ayub, Zia, and Musharraf. The courts were often used as political tools. They validated coups under the doctrine of necessity and allowed military rulers to reshape the constitution. But that is only half of the story. Since the 1990s, and especially after the 2007 lawyers' movement, the judiciary also became a crucial force for democratic restoration. It challenged military rule, pressured dictatorships to hold elections, revived parliaments dissolved by presidential powers, protected fundamental rights, and held the executive accountable during periods of weak democracy. This is why, despite its controversies, the judiciary developed a reputation as one of the last institutional checks on executive overreach. By potentially dismantling the judiciary, the 27th Amendment risks weakening an institution that has long served as a safeguard against authoritarian rule. This is not the first time that the judiciary was challenged by executives. 26th Amendment, which many call Round 1, attempted to reduce the dominance of Chief Justice by restructuring bench formation, reducing suo motu powers, and changing internal judicial procedures. The government saw it as a necessary correction to what they viewed as judicial overreach. But many lawyers warned it tipped power towards the executives. And now, with the proposed 27th Amendment, this long-standing struggle between judicial independence and executive power enters a new, even more critical phase.
At the center of the 27th Constitutional Amendment is a completely new judicial body, the Federal Constitutional Court. This court would take over constitutional interpretation, disputes involving fundamental rights, and conflicts between the Federation and the provinces. Its judges would retire at 68, which is older than the retirement age of several current Supreme Court judges. Amendment effectively abolishes the Supreme Court's suo motu powers and strips away its original jurisdiction. This leaves the Supreme Court functioning largely as an appellate court for civil and criminal matters. It also introduces structural changes, including expanded executive influence over judicial appointments via changes to the Judicial Commission and easier judicial transfers, which critics say could expose judges to executive pressure. Additionally, if judges do not accept their transfer within 30 days, they shall be subjected to disciplinary proceedings under Article 209 by the Supreme Judicial Council. The amendment's passage triggered immediate resignations. Two sitting Supreme Court judges, Justice Mansoor Ali Shah and Justice Athar Manila, resigned within just 24 hours. Justice Manila wrote that the constitution that I swore an oath to uphold is no more. Justice Mansoor Ali Shah condemned the changes as a grave assault on the constitution. Soon after, Justice Shams Mahmood Mirza of the Lahore High Court also resigned, becoming the first High Court judge to step down after the amendment became law. Across the country, lawyers and politicians reacted to resignations of judges, calling it the darkest day in our judicial history. The International Commission of Jurists also issued a strong statement, calling the 27th Amendment a flagrant attack on judicial independence and the rule of law. Justice Aminuddin has since been sworn in as the first Chief Justice of the Federal Constitutional Court.
On the surface, the 27th Amendment looks like a judicial reform, but in reality, it's a high-stakes power reshuffle between the government, the judiciary, and the military. For more than a decade, major political parties, especially the PMLN and the People's Party, have been hit by judicial activism. Cases that have toppled governments, benches formed around political controversies, and suo motu notices. The ruling coalition feels the Supreme Court has repeatedly interfered with politics. Now, with the 27th Amendment, creating a court means one thing: fresh judges of their choosing. In practical terms, a new court equals a new balance of power, one more favorable to them, granting them long-term institutional protection and leverage against their rivals. But then there's the military. Historically, the judiciary has been one of the few institutions that can legally review or challenge military decisions, and that's a problem for the military. By creating a new constitutional court, the amendment fragments judicial power. that leaves the military with fewer institutional checks, fewer challenges, and far more room to maneuver with their chosen judges in place. So while the amendment is being marketed as a modernization of the system, in reality, it shifts power dramatically towards the politicians who want fewer obstacles and towards the military who wants fewer challenges to their stronghold on the country.
By creating a new court altogether, let alone one that has expanded executive control over its structure and appointments, the amendment effectively undermines the stability of the Constitution, as when one has control over constitutional interpretation, one has control over the power held by the government. This means the long-standing principle that the judiciary must remain above political design begins to erode for decades. Even during turbulent political eras, the Supreme Court has retained authority to check executive excess and insist on constitutional boundaries. The 27th Amendment alters this balance and redirects its power to a forum whose independence will remain under scrutiny from the day it is formed. The after effects of this amendment are very obvious through the resignations of Justice Athar Minallah and Justice Mansoor Ali Shah. In his own words, Justice Mansoor Ali Shah highlights the heart of the problem. Since independence, Pakistan has lived under a single apex court. The 27th Amendment ruptures the settled design and creates a court entirely alien to the common law world. When senior judges are willing to step down from their positions in a protest, it reveals a level of institutional alarm that cannot be ignored. Finally, the most glaring problem in this amendment is the risk to civil rights as the military gains immunity, which not only shields them from further scrutiny on their actions but focuses all their power in one position that heads different branches of the army. Not only does this undermine accountability, but when any military leader is above the law, the rule of law weakens, and the civilian rights are an afterthought. The 27th Amendment is an unacceptable change and undermines this country's growth and its citizens' future.